First off, thank you all for coming. I'm Phil Peters, you all know me. I've spent a lot of time in the Southwest, so I've been really now focusing on ways in which to bring a different approach to filmmaking to film school, and I think it's more through experiential learning. So I thought, okay, let's go take a group of people and look at the geography and how it had an impact on these early filmmakers. For this experience, film is just a tool, the actual camera, to tell the stories you live.
Hello everyone, I'm Charna Davis-Wiese and welcome to UCF Profiles. It's the kind of college course I would have done anything to take. Just imagine the open range, wild western sky, and the latest film technology to put it all on. Please join me in welcoming our guests today. You can call them the Cowboys with cameras. Phil Peters from the School of Film and Digital Media here at UCF, and also John Nelson, who's a grad student. And like I said, I would have done anything to do this course. Did you dream this up of taking digital media, taking film out to the West where the old Westerns were filmed?
Yeah, I'm from the western part of the United States. I was raised in Phoenix, and then I went to college in California and Montana.
So you're a child of the desert, not a different kind of palm trees.
Well, it's a different kind of, different kind of palm trees. And I've always spent a lot of time in northern Arizona and Utah. And I was there last two years ago or 3 years ago, and I just started seeing the connections of how southern Utah was part of the film history. And so I started putting together an idea of following the footsteps of John Ford, the historic filmmaker.
25 years of amazing history of Westerns.
And he basically left Hollywood and started making Westerns as he moved across southern Utah, northern Arizona. And I just thought I wanted to really work on three things. I wanted to follow the footsteps of John Ford from Kanab, Utah, which is down by St. George, which is the closest city to Las Vegas. From there over to Monument Valley. John Ford was basically recruited to come to Monument Valley. Harry Goulding, I think is his name. I can't remember Goulding's first name, but Harry Goulding went to LA, showed photographs of Monument Valley to John Ford, and he said, I'm going to do my next film there, which was Stagecoach.
And then from then on, probably that's what the whole world thinks of as the American West.
Well, yeah, absolutely. The whole world was introduced to the American West basically through southeast Utah, has played Texas, has played southern Arizona, has played Kansas, it has played Colorado, but everyone thinks of the American West as southeast Utah. So. Last year, I started putting the idea together, and I had known John. He was not a student at the time, but I knew John's organizational skills. And we work well together in that sense, kind of double-checking each other. And I wanted to, the students camp along this whole trip, too. We don't stay in hotels. Everyone met in Las Vegas. And from Las Vegas, we headed out for Kanab, Utah, and we camped in there, and we stayed there, and we interviewed historic filmmakers, women, that had been involved in 1936 Drums Along the Mohawk and other films that were made in Kanab. And then we moved to Monument Valley and we camped there. And it was really interesting. The Sentinel sent out reporters and photographers for 4 days to be with us for 4 days. They camped with us. And
it's not the same as 4 months.
No, not the same as 4 months. And they had a great time. And then from there we moved to Moab, Utah, where John Ford again was kind of recruited to come to look at Moab, and he made Rio Grande, She Wore a Yellow Ribbon, a number of films up in Moab. So we followed his footsteps along that, and so there were three things I was after, and one was the historic aspect. The other was putting artists in a situation where they can go through a transformation. I've seen that happen so many times because. When you go and make a film, it's very, as we talked about earlier, it's a lot of work just in the filmmaking side, but then on top of that, they're camping, and there's a lot of stress involved in that people go through a transformation. I really do believe that. So there was the historic footsteps, the artist in transformation through the experience, and finally looking at the landscape as a character, because in Western films, the landscape is as the landscape and the characters.
Needed an Emmy, never got one.
Yeah, absolutely.
An Oscar, rather.
So those are the three things we looked at last year.
Did you know what you were getting into?
No, I mean, I have full faith and confidence in Phil, and again, we worked well together. And
But you're from Florida.
Yeah.
And living in
born and
camping
raised
and
in Florida. I mean, the most hilliest part I saw was Clearmont. So I really looked for the trip as far as being inspiration, because my undergraduate was in digital media, and all my peers, you're pretty much you're stuck in a lab all day behind a screen, working on virtual worlds or any kind of computer graphics. And I saw this as an opportunity to kind of actually go out and experience something a little more real, and kind of taking like the education and tools we have now as artists, and how can you apply that to, revisiting the past and doing something new with that.
Do you remember when Phil called you and said, "I've got this idea"?
I'm on board.
And you talk about the camping, and then and we were talking a little bit about this before the taping. Is working in television news, and people see the glamour of it, and they see they see the final product, or maybe a couple of pictures out there with a camera, but they don't realize that you're trudging through the heat and through the rocks, and you're carrying tripods, and you're carrying lighting, and you're carrying. So it was probably a big entourage, even though you needed a big entourage, but you had a lot of stuff.
We kept it as a kind of lean and mean operation. I mean, there was 8 of us,
Yeah.
2 minivans, all the camping gear. I mean, I tended to be, John and I kind of split the work up. Well, everyone participated. Everyone had to cook. Everyone had to help set up tents. John and I, we had camp roles, so everyone had not only camp things to do, they also had interview aspects. But I will have to say the people that were doing a lot of the camera work, they were very busy because they had to be up before everyone else to shoot us getting up and getting ready, getting our life ready to go. So they had long days.
So they did a documentary of what you were doing.
Right.
So you actually had 2 different things going on at once.
Yeah, and so that was, and the dust. I don't think, being from Florida, people were ready for the dust in the gear.
The temperature changes, because I know I've been out in camping in the desert, and it's so hot in the daytime and so cold at night. Did you find that happening there?
Yeah, I mean, there's actually one trip you'll see us there's pictures of us in snow, and someone's in tank tops and shorts.
Yeah.
2 hours later, we're on the bottom of the mountain. It's hot, Yeah,
in the Southwest, temperatures gauged by elevation more than anything, in the sense that we would be down at 3,000 feet and it'd be 90 degrees. 95 degrees, and then we would be at 9,000 feet and be in the 30s. We camped at Bryce Canyon. It was 8,000 feet. It was probably in the 30s, 40s that night. We camped at Zion, which is down at maybe 4,000 feet. It was a beautiful night. It was probably 70 degrees out, and everyone didn't even put up their tents that night. It was so warm. The night before, everyone was kind of huddled up together in their sleeping bags, and then the next night, everyone was like, John, you guys
slept outside.
Slept outside without a tent because it was gorgeous. That was
a lot of that we're just kind of fatigued. We hated just pulling the gear out. We just forget it. We just sleep on the ground.
They
it's
put
like
up
the tail end of the trip. So.
How did the gear react to the temperature changes?
So like the camera gear?
Yeah, did you have problems with condensation on the lenses? You're going from hot to cold.
The camera pretty much stopped working the last 2 days.
I would imagine.
It was primarily dust.
Yeah.
The dust is particularly over in Monument Valley. The wind, Monument Valley was formed by wind erosion, and it's windy there pretty much all the time except late at night, like 3 or 4 in the morning, it calms down. But other than that, it is a constant, particularly where we camp too. I knew I had been to this one campground, and it is right on the edge of the cliffs that look out into the Monument Valley. Now, you pay for that in that it is constantly windy. But I don't think, like when we go back next year, this coming summer, I wouldn't want to camp anywhere else because
it's worth the view.
Yeah, you wake up and the whole Monument Valley is there.
Like the view is basically, it's kind of like closing shots of very well-known movies like Forrest Gump, like Thelma and Louise is like the very iconic look, and you wake up to that, so it's very inspiring.
You know what, it's amazing when you think of all the different types of movies that have been shot basically in the same place, like Forrest Gump, Thelma Louise, and the John Wayne movies, yet it's like the best character actor that ever was.
Oh yeah, and there's a modern conflict going on in the sense of protecting that. John and I have talked about this numerous times. Kanab was the center of feature filmmaking in the 20s and 30s. And then it became the center of TV serials, How the West Was Won, Death Valley Days, Bonanza, Wagon Train, Gunsmoke. The cassettes of Gunsmoke have to be fenced off because people want to come there. When we were there, we got special permission to get in there, and sure enough, the gate was open.
Yeah.
People were wandering in while we were there. So Kanab lives in the 30s and 40s, and they kind of disappeared, and they're kind of going, what happened? Monument Valley was controlled by the tribe, the Navajo tribe, and they asserted their power, which they should have, and the filmmakers just kind of ran roughshod over them in the 30s and 40s. And then in the 60s, they more or less said enough, and they took it back, and filmmaking doesn't really happen there much anymore in Monument Valley itself. The last film made in Monument Valley was Code Talker, about the Navajo code talkers. So what happened is that the filmmaking then moved up to Moab, which is about 150, 200 miles north. And that has an international airport. It has 4-star hotels. The things which modern stars and film crews want. Monument Valley doesn't have that, and Kanab doesn't have that. So basically, when you see the Red Rock country now, it's more than likely somewhere around Moab. Thelma and Louise was all done in Moab, completely done in Moab, in and around Moab. So that's what kind of the transformation, and all of those towns have different feelings about them. The kind of stuck in the past, Kanab, a little jewel box of history, Monument Valley, to modern filmmaking.
You had a Navajo guide. Did you have a guide that was?
A couple places, like in Monument Valley, where they wouldn't let you just run out there by yourself. So
Right.
they kind of just took you out. So
Don't you think that the people who actually live there and have the history and have the stories told from generation, they probably taught you a lot more than you'd ever.
Well, it's very humbling. I mean, you look back at some of the movies and you see how, as historic and as iconic they are, it is a misrepresentation of their culture. So, I find it's kind of a weird thing now. You think they kind of want people to kind of come back and remake new stories and new films to kind of portray them more accurately, but I can see maybe how they've been discussed or just fed up and they've just protected it. So you look at the reasons why the filmmaking stopped there. Was it because they were protecting the land, or because that look is just so iconic? How can you reproduce it and not seem like you're copycatting John Ford or something like that?
Maybe a little bit of both.
Well, you brought up something that I think that came out of this trip. I'd been to this area numerous times. I actually was a ranger at one of the national parks.
Really?
Not far from there. We went there, and that was another story. We had so many interesting stories. I mean, we go to this park that I was a ranger, and I introduced everybody to the ranger, and there was a sign there that said, bubonic plague.
Do not touch wildlife. Bubonic plague. I'm like, wasn't that like over in the 15th century?
And John said, "Is that anything we have to worry about?" He said that to the head ranger. He goes, "Oh no, don't worry about it.
Just don't pet the rats."
Yeah, and sure enough,
We feel like a dead rat. I'm like, well, all right, there's a dead rat in the riverbed, and then the next day we're in Moab. We see in the news that little CNN ticker tape. I'm like, Natural Bridges Park closed due to plague. I'm like, we were there yesterday. You know?
Yeah. So we had many. Fun. I mean, we laugh about it now,
Yeah.
but a lot of fun things like that, of tents blowing down, and because when you're traveling, and I told the group, I said, we're not short of a major catastrophe. If it rains, we get in our tent. If it's windy, we tie them down. John, I remember that time you guys were out dealing with the wind.
Yeah.
You're smiling. What happened?
No, we all kind of gradually got sick. Half of us got sick, and the last day, I had like very bad fever, and they all went on a little expedition. I'm like, no, I'm just gonna stay here and trying to find shade. I'm just like basically kind of curled around this bush, like a sundial, chasing the shade. And I see one of our campmates' tents. All the stakes are up. It's ready to hang on the cliff. I'm like, forget it. It's gonna have to blow away because I can't move.
So did it?
No, it hung on.
Yeah.
And I went to go sleep in the car.
Did somebody go home because?
There was 8 of us that
virus?
went on the trip, and I think one of us had the flu, arrived with the flu, and it was.
Because there's really nowhere to get it out there.
Yeah.
No, and I immediately called the doctor, and they said, no, if it was food poisoning, you'd all have it, because we all ate the same thing. We cooked, and he
And I
said,
was a very good cook. So
we were very good
there
cook.
was
We
no
had
food
hygiene in
poisoning.
the camp. That was, and he said, no, somebody has the flu, and then one by one, 4 of the 8 were sick, and it was, thank God, it was a very fast moving. It was a 24-hour flu.
Good. It wasn't a 7-day one. That would have been
Oh
really...
yeah, it's when I was the first to get it, actually, and I still remember. John woke up. I was already up, and I was sick, and I said, "John, I've got the flu," and I thought, "Oh my gosh, the whole 7 days I'm going to be sick." And thank God it was only 24 hours. But one of the students was not hyperventilator, dehydrated.
Oh, that's not good.
No, and we took him to a Navajo hospital. They were incredibly helpful. I mean, they said, we can't even take non-Navajos. And I said, oh, I've got 2 sick students here. And one was fine. She went back to the group, but the other, the doctor said, I won't release them back to camping. And I said, well, I can't, we're moving on. And the next day, and I said, there was no hotels in a lot of the places we're going. And I said, Michael, you need to talk to your parents. So he got on the phone with his parents and decided to fly home at that point. But he's still excited about the program.
Ready to go next time.
Yeah. So he's still excited. He realized that was one of the hazards of the program.
And we'll talk a little bit more about it when we come back. We'll be right back. We're talking with Phil Peters and John Nelson. Phil Peters is part of the School of Film and Digital Media here at UCF, and John Nelson is a graduate student, and we're talking about the program Cowboys with Cameras. When you talked about cooking, I did an Outward Bound once, and everybody, did you all change positions? You didn't do it the same thing, and I was lucky enough to be the first cook, and you're the lucky ones because you get to use the fresh stuff before it goes bad. What kind of things, when you're in the wilderness, you eat the most unusual things?
Well, John's you should talk about. John is a sushi chef, so he should.
Yeah, I mean, these weren't like we made pretty elaborate meals because we wanted it to be kind of an enriching experience, and students, they paid a pretty dime to go out there, so that was kind of like the entertainment was like a nice elaborate meal. We had stuff like kanab kebabs.
Kanab kebabs?
I made like a little menu to make it friendly, a little more entertaining. So every night was a surprise. We made like a nice pasta and cheese with shrimp. It wasn't like beans and hot dogs. It was like a.
Oh, we did too. We were able to bake and bury things under the ground, and it was really like you say, it became the entertainment of the day.
Absolutely. One night we were in Bryce Canyon, and one of the students said, "Let's make cornbread." I said, "All right, we'll make cornbread."
I don't know how.
We'll make it. And we made cornbread. But John and I, the way we thought about it is that we set kind of the framework. So we came up with the menus. And then we would have it. Okay, you're cooking tonight. Here's the menu. The coolers were set up in. I think we had one was all vegetables, and they were layered according to days. So we just work our way through the cooler.
You are really good at organization.
We had to be very efficient because of space.
Of space.
And plus, you don't want to waste a lot of time looking for a celery stalk.
I mean, we tried to keep it really modeled after like a production crew. Everyone has a task. And there's not a lot of waste, not a lot of time wasted.
And you don't want to spend a lot of time unpacking, and you don't want more things that you have to carry.
That was very efficient, actually. And what happened, we found, is that after the first day, people fell into natural roles. Some people like to cook. Some people like to set up the fire. So at first we assigned roles just in case it fell apart, and we could always go back to that. We never did.
Yeah, because you don't want we had what's it, this one person just like I'm not doing anything. So we kind of had it said like, well, no, you're in charge of the water today. But everyone was very helpful, and everyone wanted to pitch in.
So you really have an idea how the crews were then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they camped at John Wayne, and
we did a mock camping in his backyard before we went.
To get ready.
Set up the tents.
Make sure all the gear was there. We weren't missing anything.
Because if it's broken or missing out there, there's nothing you can do about it.
We sent a bunch of Coleman stoves. One of them was totally destroyed by the transportation safety people. They probably airport security took it apart.
Oh my gosh! And they couldn't put it back together.
Well, we arrived at the first campground, and it was in pieces, and we got one burner working.
So that's probably one in process, redundancy. If we're going to be self-contained, that have some kind of backup plan.
It was From an organizational standpoint, John and I can't think of anything that totally took us by surprise. We were really
The price of firewood.
the price of firewood. There's no wood to.
You can't chop down
no.
a tree.
We never budgeted, like we had to buy wood in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. So yeah, that in that sense.
And because there's no wood to chop down, it's probably
Yeah.
pretty expensive. It's probably more expensive than the people on the side of the road
Oh,
here
oh,
when the
absolutely.
That
temperature
we're in a
goes.
lot of like national parks and stuff. They don't want everyone just.
Right.
But the thing I think, another thing that we ran into that was really interesting that I had not, I mean, I obviously knew a lot about Mormon culture in Utah, but we consistently ran into pioneer women, or Utah pioneer women in both Kanab and Moab, and then the Navajo woman who wasn't Mormon, but a Navajo woman in Monument Valley. And I think everyone was kind of, didn't know much about Mormon culture, but that was kind of something I
Like
didn't
a
know.
true kind of like survivor mentality.
Yeah.
They've really held on to their heritage.
Oh, absolutely.
They really do, even more so than the rest of us who have assimilated into whatever our surroundings are.
Well, they were a subculture for many, many years, for decades, the Utah Mormon subculture, and now that it's becoming more mainstream, and it's just kind of, they're being more open about it. I've even seen that in the few years I've been going there.
See, that was one of the things that really fascinated me with the trip, because my background before digital media was anthropology. When I graduated high school in '93, the internet wasn't around. I didn't have all these tools and programming and stuff like that. And so when that came out, that became a side interest. And that was one of the things I liked about this trip, that you pick up all these little tangents that you wouldn't get if you were sitting behind a computer screen working on simulation. In like our digital media department, they work hard on kind of creating virtual worlds, making things as realistic as possible. Kind of the way I see it, it's really tough to kind of simulate something if you've never experienced anything. So.
That kind of brings us to what we want to do in the future, is that this trip coming up, John and I looked at this last year as a reconnaissance trip. Is this a worthwhile project? If it is a worthwhile, can we pull it off? And is the university interested in continuing? All of those were yes. Yes, it was worthwhile. Yes, we can pull it off and make it happen safely. And yes, was it worthwhile to the students and to the university? And the university's been really supportive of me doing it, helping John with a research assistantship at the university, giving me support many ways. And so this year, we're expanding on those three areas of the historic filmmakers, the artist in transformation, and then the geography as character. For instance, what we're doing in the historic filmmakers is that we want to do some reenactments. We're going to take some cameras and set up some historic scenes. One of the towns is so interested in this, they're going to provide us with cowboys and horses, wagons, because student filmmakers very seldom work with that. You think about when
You can't afford to pay them.
That's right. To get
Especially in Florida, no one knows how to ride a horse anyway.
right, and so that they want to help people to understand the Western. So we're going to do some reenactments with the students. We are going to have we had a round table this last time of maybe 8 people. The state of Utah sent some people down, and we discussed some of the issues that went on in Utah, and that was very successful, and we're going to grow that round table conference a little bit. And then finally, a very interesting thing we're going to do is that we're going to take a satellite dish with us and uplink to a satellite, then back down here at UCF, and then have a website of a live feed so people can go along.
Cowboy cam.
That's right.
Film cowboy cam.
Yeah, and people can go along. You can go to a website and be with us.
That would be great.
And so that's kind of what we want, kind of a virtual team member.
Was it as good as you expected? Better?
Oh, it was far better. I mean, I'm thinking like, when I drive through like Florida now, it's completely boring. Just palmetto after palmetto.
I remember one of the last nights when we were out on the campfire, and the first day you're thinking, oh, we're going to live through this. The weather came back, it was storming, it was horrible. The last day, somebody said, why do we have to go back?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
Why do we have to go back? And to the last one of us, and I remember the river guide saying, because your people are there.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that sums it up for me was, as the group, just watching the transformation. The first night was cold. I mean, it was cold, and everyone was huddled around the fire. I could tell some people were going, what have I got myself into? By the last night, it was beautiful weather, but the night before at Bryce, it was cold too. And it was like, oh, it's cold, so what? Just put on another layer, let's pull up closer to the fire, let's make some cornbread. We really had bonded as a group.
Yeah.
And that's, for me, as I told the group, is that when you go in this kind of experience, you really come down to the basics of what is important. Am I dry? Am I warm? Have I been fed? Do I have shelter? And those, you really get to the basics of what's necessary in life. So,
And it really teaches you a lot of lessons in
yeah,
life.
and it was, we look forward to it next year, next summer.
Same place?
Same place where John and I have been. What happened, as we would go, there's a tremendous amount of European tourism comes to southeast Utah because of these films. They see the films, they see the TV shows. They want to go to this southeast Utah. Northern Arizona has the greatest concentration of national parks in maybe the world, but in the United States. So a lot of Germans come there. So John and I want to do this where we possibly, and they would always talk about Clint Eastwood and the spaghetti westerns. So we want to now take this to Spain and do the same thing in Spain where the spaghetti westerns were shot.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to have to register when you go to Spain. Phil Peters, John Nelson, thanks so much for joining us. It seemed like that half hour just whipped by. We need a whole 4 months to talk about your 4 months. I'm Charna Davis-Weese. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you again next time.
It really has turned into exactly what I wanted it to be, a transformation of artists. I wanted to change them. I wanted people to be able to look at their lives differently from this experience.